Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of SQUPCAST. I'm Adam from SquaredUp, and today I've got my colleague Tim with me. Hey, Tim.
Hi, Adam. How you doing?
Very good, thanks. Today's episode, we are talking engineering dashboards. It's a topic obviously very close to our heart as a software engineering company, but it's also proving to be a really popular use case with a lot of our customers. We've got some good marketing efforts in this area that are attracting some good attention. We've got loads of plugins focused on this use case that are getting some good traction, and we're putting a lot of effort into those. So I thought it was worth an episode with an expert to sort of dig into this use case a bit, sort of share our own story, and maybe that'll help inspire some others to try it out. How about we start though, Tim, with just a little bit about you. Let's get in. It's probably just worth saying, actually, for anyone who has watched our dashboard stories, Tim will obviously be a very familiar face, having appeared on quite a few other episodes of other series, but fresh to SQUPCAST, as we all are. So, Tim, over to you. Who are you? What do you do? Tell us all about yourself.
Thanks. Yeah, so Tim Wheeler, Director of Engineering here at SquaredUp. What do I do? I guess that's the whole episode to go into. What do I do and why do I need dashboards? But broadly, I'm in charge of engineering for the cloud product. I manage several engineering teams as well as DevOps and system monitoring that we have on SquaredUp.
Okay. Director of Engineering sounds like a pretty lofty job title. Is it the same? Does it mean the same everywhere? Or is a Director of Engineering at SquaredUp going to be the same as a Director of Engineering anywhere else?
No, short answer. Yeah, I mean, like most job titles, I think in IT especially, you'll find slightly different variations for the same role. Like you see head of engineering, you can even see it as like senior manager, program manager, director of engineering something. It depends, massively on the type of organization, what the business is, and how large they are, how many kind of tiers they have through their management structure.
Okay. So always kind of keeping the wheels turning, but maybe in a slightly different way from a different position. That's interesting. And I guess that means the engineering dashboards is never going to be necessarily the same for everyone. We couldn't make a nice sample pack, for example, that would cater to everyone. What do engineering dashboards mean to you? What do you use them for primarily?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question about the sample pack. I don't know. Could you maybe? I mean, there's definitely some things that we all have in common, right? We're all trying to build software, right? So we all have a tool that helps us build the software. The sort of CI/CD components. We all need to store our code somewhere, so we're all going to have a repository. And I hope pretty much all of us have some sort of project management behind it. So for us at SquaredUp, our main tools are Jira, GitHub. That's where we store and PR our code from, and Azure DevOps, which is does all of our CI/CD. And I'd say that they're pretty reflective of large part of the market will be using the same tools. And so dashboarding for me a lot of the time involves those three tools. They're probably like, if we didn't have SquaredUp on SquaredUp, that's where I'd be spending huge amounts of my time checking out progress, checking out issues that have been been raised. So what SquaredUp gives me, which is my core use case, is bringing that data together on demand and shaping it into visualizations that allow me to answer the questions I've got, or often the questions my boss has.
I guess we see plenty of commonality in that kind of that kind of grouping, right? You have a work management tool, you've got somewhere where your code is stored, and you've got some kind of CI/CD deployment tool. So we have plenty of customers using things like GitLab, Jenkins. We use ADO, and there are obviously alternatives to Jira out there. If anybody's using them, I don't know, but it seems like they've kind of cornered the market quite well. So I guess that's That's the slice that tells you sort of what the engineering team's doing on a day-to-day basis, right? That probably covers most of it. Maybe integrate to the HR system to see who's on holiday or, that kind of stuff. ADO deploys our app into primarily AWS, but we also have some Azure components. How much of a day-to-day insight do you need into those platforms where we're actually deploying our running application?
Yeah, well, as I said earlier, so the system monitoring is also something I manage. So that side of it, knowing where our serverless infrastructure is, or rather what it's up to, where there are issues, particularly trying to see things that might spike, that might give us early warnings of maybe problems that are coming, because every customer is using it slightly differently, using it with a different sort of intensity at different times of the day. We have more than one region, so the monitoring that we have to do there across AWS and Azure is I guess, it's almost classic ops system monitoring, but for the fact that it's all in the cloud. It's a service that's provided to us. We're using Lambdas in AWS. So it's a huge part of the dashboarding we do there is to just better understand what's going on and trying, I guess, defensively make sure that we're seeing any issues as soon as possible.
Yeah, nice. I know from sort of watching some of our Slack channels where we're also using a mix of other sort of associated monitoring tools, like we have Pingdom checking APIs are up and that kind of stuff. How much is cost a factor from the cloud hosting point of view for someone like yourself?
For me personally, not a huge part of my sort of day to day. Like for instance, our CTO is much more involved with that, I guess, because he probably has to turn up at the board and defend himself. But yeah, I mean, again, the joy of SquaredUp is the fact that we can roll all this data up. So we share one large internal account. So I'm able to drill down and look at costs where I'm concerned. Maybe I know someone's going to care about it, right? So if I see, I don't know, our Cosmos DB usage really going really high, then I'll be like, oh, I can actually drill into what that's going to cost us on like a day-to-day or a month-to-month.
Okay. Well, I guess before we get into how awesome SquaredUp is, let's talk about how terrible the world is without it. So, we've talked about quite a few tools there. There's maybe 6 or 7 key tools that are sort of part of your day-to-day. In an organization that doesn't have SquaredUp or a tool sort of along these lines, what does that typically look like? Is work very sort of segregated to different people, or is there somebody with 8 monitors on their desk sort of keeping an eye on everything?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some places where there are the 8 monitor solution, but yeah, like I said, I would be spending a lot of time between tools, in between tabs. All of these tools we've mentioned, I think, every tool we've mentioned has its own visualization, dashboarding. A lot of them have integrations that kind of connect. Atlassian, for instance, have their marketplace where you can buy a lot of third-party tools to try and, cover the different use cases people have. I think my main takeaway is that all of these places, well, any significant IT sort of or software development department or company has a huge number of tools, and all the other solutions, with integrations between software A and software B, are kind of band-aids. They're halfway houses. They then, the number of times in my career I've been like, okay, I can do that. Now where's the download the CSV so that I can put everything into Excel and write a bit of VBA or write a little bit of a formula to try and make sense of all this data. And if I can share another anecdote, one previous place I worked very much went for the data lake sort of solution. So there was one team, one department that was entirely responsible for dragging all of the data from the company of all types and landing it in a data lake. It's the classic all singing, all dancing, like have all your data in one place. Sure. It's amazing. And, they did an amazing job of building something that, just consumed huge amounts of daily data. The problem was, like, from my point of view, is everyone wanted one kind of slice, one sliver for themselves. So while building the data lake was relatively quick and they did it really well, the building all the feeds that people wanted of kind of procuring the data was a work of years to try and get right and then maintain. That's certainly a pain point I've seen before, because no other team knew the data well enough to be self-service, if you know what I mean. That's kind of where it fell down.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, we have to take an approach kind of like that with some of our commercial data, but that's more because tool A needs to put data into tool B as well as 15 other tools. And then the aggregate of all of that has to end up back in tool A. And sometimes it's not just about seeing the data. Sometimes there is that element of enriching data in different sources for various purposes. But for a lot of our visualization that we use SquaredUp for in the commercial half of the company, it is a case of just plug into Salesforce and HubSpot and use SQL Analytics to stitch it together without having to put it in a data warehouse first. So yeah, I think there are some good parallels with sort of most teams suffer those sort of similar pains, right? They all have too many tools, that kind of stuff. In cases where companies don't have maybe they have lots of segregated teams, all with like little slices of the pie, and the teams are otherwise very happy with what they've got. Like, I've got my view on tool A and that's all I care about. Is there always still going to be somebody like yourself who suffers that pain of having those 5 teams with their 5 different tools and you just want the one answer to a question? Is that kind of universal?
Yeah, I think that's always going to be a problem, right? Because someone somewhere up the hierarchy of the company are going to ask questions that are across teams, whether it's cost, whether it's, why does one sort of delivery of a feature or a service take much longer? Why are there loads of bugs in one area? The only way you're going to answer those questions is by comparing across all the teams. And if everyone's got their own tools, which in my opinion is a good thing, right? You should have the tools that work for you, that you're either comfortable with or best in class. But if everyone's using different tools, then joining that data together is a lot of work. Again, you're going back to the sort of, how do I download it all into CSV so I can combine it together?
Sure. Good old Excel to the rescue, yeah.
I mean, it's a great tool for that.
We quite a lot of our customers ask us about things like Dorom metrics or red metrics, that kind of stuff. And I mean, I wouldn't call myself an expert on those, but is that the kind of scenario where you really kind of need that analytics layer? There's probably not unless you buy a dedicated tool for Dorom metrics, if such a thing exists. Yeah. How would you typically get to that kind of result?
Yeah, you're just making me think about whether there are tools that just do Dora. Certainly, there's a few tools that kind of have metrics out of the box, but yeah, what was the question? How would I build Dora metrics?
Yeah, I mean, is that the kind of case, for somebody like yourself, is that one of those cases where you're going to end up relying on data from a few different sources to get an end result, even if it's the same metric from a few different tools? Or, we have multiple Azure DevOps organizations, for example. And if we want to just have a good Azure DevOps dashboard showing all of our build failures for the day, we kind of can't do that in ADO regardless. But there are then those higher level things like calculating engineering metrics, like Dora, for example. Is that the sort of scenario where you need an analytics layer, an analytics tool, something like SquaredUp? Or are there, does ADO give you some sense of that kind of information?
Yeah, I mean, you probably hit the most important thing first, which is Azure DevOps, at least as far as I know, is not very good at doing cross-project, cross-organization analysis. And since, most companies, you don't have to get very big before you want to use multiple projects or multiple organizations, then combining that data is really hard. I mean, actually calculating Dora metrics, we're not talking about, you don't need to any very fancy analytics. The maths, if you like, is not hard. It's it's the integration with your whatever your source of that data is and pulling it all together across teams. If you've got, well, I've previously had a team using CircleCI, Jenkins, and Azure DevOps. They've all got the metric that you want, but you've got to kind of standardize that and bring it together, and then you get the number you're after. And the problem with the Excel solution is it doesn't tend to be live, right? Mm-hmm. Someone's got to crank.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think to make the pushing of the data, there's still a certain manual element to it.
Yeah. I guess another interesting point there is that there is probably that very lightweight use case where, for you, a good engineering dashboard might just be that one dashboard that you can't achieve for the one tool you care about the most. And all you want is one view of Azure DevOps or Jenkins, for example. And at 9 o'clock every Monday, you want a screenshot of that in Slack for your team stand-up. It's very, very simple. No analytics involved, just a nicer looking dashboard put in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Do we use much for that? I know we use monitoring quite a lot internally. We get screenshots of tiles posted all over the place in Slack when there's something for somebody to look at. Commercial as well as engineering stuff ends up like that. I know we've got some commercial sort of scheduled dashboards. Have you seen cases of sort of wanting to like power up enhance a stand up with a dashboard being delivered, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really, really common use, is to just simply shape the data the way you want and see it on one screen. And then you can very quickly have an expression of what progress is or what we're trying to achieve this week. Yeah. So okay. Sometimes, as you say, it doesn't have to be complex.
Yeah. And one thing that is often a challenge, I build a lot of our internal commercial dashboards. I build a dashboard that makes perfect sense to me, and it gets pushed into Slack at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. And the first question I get is, what the hell does all that mean? I'm like, well, isn't it obvious? And it often isn't obvious to the audience unless you're pretty good at sort of building a dashboard. If you're building them for somebody else, you really have to take that, like their context into account. My dashboard showing nothing but CloudWatch logs, for example, probably isn't the dashboard you want to understand platform health. So then you are getting into analytics or, having to build a CloudWatch dashboard alongside your Azure Monitor dashboard, your Custo dashboard, that kind of stuff. So I think like the right context is often important, and sometimes those tools just aren't designed to give you management metrics or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's the curse of any sort of data curator, right? It's you spend so long in it, everything seems obvious, and then you try and you say, look, here are these 6 lovely visualizations, and people are like, what am I looking at?
Yeah,
there's a skill in that, isn't there? Like telling the story.
Yeah, but I wrote a good tile title. What more do you want from me? Is that not enough? No, sometimes it isn't. Should we maybe let's take a look at some of the dashboards that we use internally. I know you've got a couple that you could share for people. We'll talk through them for anybody who's only listening to this. These videos do all end up on YouTube as well, so feel free to check back on these later.
Let me find the right share button. That always helps, doesn't it?
Well, just to sort of fill the space a bit for anyone who's interested, at SquaredUp we have one main organization in SquaredUp Cloud that everyone has access to. It's split up into dozens and dozens of workspaces by different teams, by different services. With quite a lot going on in our sort of internal workspace, and engineering have a few different workspaces they use. And I'll put you on the spot here, Tim, and say they're obviously going to be really awesome dashboards, built perfectly, working perfectly, no errors at all.
I mean, this is live demoing, so who knows what can happen.
Exactly.
So I want to throw this up because I think it really fits the example of what you were talking about, like in a stand-up or something. We just want a simple visualization, right? So this literally is showing what is running in like sort of production pipelines. So a lot of these pipelines don't run very often because they're for building a particular artifact or service. But it's just one page that if you glance across it, looks green, right? And that's what it's telling me. I have nothing to worry about with all the last runs that are going on. Simple. There's nothing clever behind it. It's all Azure DevOps data, using our health blocks to make the pretty green rectangles, and then they're monitored. And there is a notification that runs off of the dashboard status. So this, sorry, I forgot we're doing a podcast as well. So what I've got is a large set of grids, and within those grids, some of them have a green health block, as we call it, so to show that everything's fine. And at the very top of the dashboard, in the top left, there is a health status as well. So if any of those tiles beneath it were to turn yellow for warning, red for failure in the pipeline, then the dashboard would have that health status, and I and some of my colleagues would get a Slack notification straight away.
Nice. So for anyone who hasn't sort of tried monitoring yet, you can turn it on any tile, basically. And in this case, I'd assume these are state monitors. So you're just looking for whether ADO is saying, green, amber, red, that kind of thing. And if it's green, it rolls up as green. If it's red, it rolls up as red. So you I guess realistically, your dashboard probably doesn't include this stuff, right? Yours just has the DevOps pipeline monitoring health tile on it, and it represents the state of all active pipelines. You could view it from that sort of level above.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like this sort of dashboard that we're looking at the moment is just, one data source. So once you're connected, build it in 10 minutes.
Nice. Yeah, this could equally be, these could be, how many have we got there? Sort of 11 projects in one ADO organization. There could be 11 projects in 11 ADO organizations coming through 11 connections to Azure DevOps. And, that's, I guess, one of the big wins with the way our data sources work is if you've got multiple orgs, you can just basically stitch them all together in your dashboard. You don't need separate dashboards for different organizations, that kind of stuff. So a real sort of solid view for multi-org metrics in that case.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. So simple health. Let's see some wiggly lines or some nice bar charts or something.
All right. Well, let's. There is a Dora dashboard here, so that does some calculations of our metrics. So the ones we're showing here are the daily deployments. So that's one of the Dora metrics, is how many deployments you do. So I compare our sort of week-on-week average. So give me some confidence that we're proceeding well. So previous week we were averaging 2.7 deployments per day, and this is purely into the SquaredUp product. And then for the last week it was 1.7. So 2 full weeks ago it was 2.7, and then this week it's 1.7. And then, I like to see the deployments going across the week, see what goes on. No one deploying on Saturday. A little disappointing, but fair enough, I suppose. And then the second set of metrics we've got down here is lead time. So lead time in Dora is the time it takes you to go from developing a feature and then releasing it to production. So within any company, you can kind of define your own, like, what is that window of time? And so long as you're consistent, then it's going to give you a meaningful metric that you can use to improve your engineering process. So for us, what we look at is when we go from the PR, so essentially when the developer's saying, I'm finished, here's my feature, to when it is live in our production system. And so, that's what's giving us the graph, with a lovely trend line, which is going down, which is obviously good news, because the lead time going down means we're deploying, getting things into production faster.
When you mentioned the PR there, are you talking about when a PR is opened, or when it's after it's approved and merged? Are you talking about like pure when it's build time, or when it's raised? Yeah. So that's I guess a good measure of. I guess you could have that alongside something like the number of open PRs, and you'd probably expect the more PRs are open, the longer it takes them all to get reviewed, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So this is really representing for us, like, how long the process of code reviewing, any manual testing we want to do on top of our automation, and the actual CI/CD to get it through the pipelines. because obviously we run a lot of automation tests as these go
Yeah.
through. And, you know, what that's useful for us is to just make sure that our process isn't full of roadblocks, because it's very easy to be like, I've got, you know, amazing 10x developers that are all churning out features, but if they get stuck in test or they getting reviewed and they're not following the right sort of style or approach to coding that we want, and they have to keep going back, then you're going to see a very large lead time.
Mm-hmm. It's the number of deployments a day is interesting to me. Why does that matter? Is that just another measure of engineering effectiveness, or is it spying on how busy everyone is, or what's the?
No, there are other dashboards, I think the thing about Dorom metrics is individually they're not necessarily that powerful. What you're looking at is a combination of the different metrics. So having just daily deployments is like, okay, fine. You can say that, you know, depending on the number of people you've got working, but you can say that, yeah, we're capable of churning out this many releases in a day. And if you've got the number of people working on it, you can say, okay, so that many people gets me that many releases a week. What it's more useful at is where you're combining the daily deployments with maybe your lead time, with maybe your change failure rate. So I don't have that on this dashboard, but I took it out because ours was 0 this week, which was lovely. But change failure rate is the number of times you fail to push something into production. So this is not a reflection of anything the developer's doing necessarily, like is it not like anything within their PR. It's as it goes through your gates, whatever those gates may be, pre-prod, maybe like a beta, and then into like the wild, if you like. So then you could compare like change failure rate. If that starts going up, has your daily deployments also started going up? So maybe people are running too fast and we need to insert more manual checks, or vice versa. Like with us, our change failure rate at the moment is 0. So do we need to be more aggressive with the way we push things out? Are we spending too long in the test process? It's that sort of combination that really gives you the power of the Dorom metrics.
Nice. Okay. And what's the typical data behind this? Is this all Azure DevOps, or is this Jira data, GitHub data? What's the
for the lead time, we're looking at GitHub and Azure DevOps combined, because obviously I need to know about the PR, which is in GitHub, but I also need to know when it hits our production system, which is when the production pipeline finishes in Azure DevOps. So yeah, just combining those. And that is using SQL analytics under the hood to kind of match the data up.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Okay. And I guess in our deployment pipeline as well, we sort of deploy to like a preview environment that we use internally. There's a delay period before it hits end users. All of that, I guess, is sort of factored in the equation somehow. Yeah.
Not the 48 hours that we wait before it goes into the wild, just because that is a choice we make, if you like. Like we could take off that 48 hours, or if I'm trying to estimate this like delivery time for someone, I can just add 48 hours to the window.
Sure. Nice. Okay. Are there any other? We talked about in a Dashboard Fridays episode a while ago. I think topics like engineering excellence, that kind of stuff. Are there any sort of metrics that maybe aren't specifically sort of tied into like technical work that are interesting in this context?
Well, I've kind of abstracted a dashboard, just kind of like normalized. It's not a very visually exciting dashboard, but it is engineering excellence is definitely like a passion of mine. I think part of what we believe at SquaredUp is that, you can focus on not just output and how much of a product you get done, but it's, being able to build a quality product, being able to build it efficiently, and also being able to achieve like a happy working environment as well. I was reading an old blog on the death march concept. Have you ever come across that?
I haven't.
Okay, so the death march of a project is basically the concept that you can set up a team, you can do the sort of hot housing approach, you get everyone co-located, you crack the whip, you set unreasonable deadlines, and you can produce a lot of code and you can make a product and start start enhancing the product, but eventually you're going to destroy everyone that's working on that product because you're doing it in an unsustainable way, as in you're going to be breaking their will. And so engineering excellence is one of the things it's really studying is how you can have productivity and how you can have good quality code, and it doesn't have to be driven with the stick. It doesn't have to be about
sure.
I only want these type of people that work these hours, and I need them in at the weekends, which is definitely not my way or the SquaredUp way. And so what we're looking at here, to come back from that tangent, is the type of workload that's going on between two different teams. And the question I was trying to answer is, what are the different types of work in terms of whether it's customer-facing work, whether it's fixing bugs, and how might that impact the team? Because, if I ask a team lead, oh, how is the team? And everything's kind of the same as it was last month or the month before, they'll probably say fine. It's a very normal thing to say everything's fine, but they don't have the context of maybe what the other team is working on, and maybe it would be better if they did some of their work or they shared the work between them. So that's one of the puzzles that I'm afraid I don't have a magic answer for, but something I try and work on at SquaredUp. And what we're looking at here is a comparison of the number of changes that Team A and Team B are making that are customer based. So as in they might have come from a bug or they might have come from a feature request. So you can kind of assume that the team that does more customer changes is going to be more engaged with what the product is used for, right? Because they're seeing those requests come through. But the flip side of that is if you're doing a lot of escalations and you're doing escalations all the time, and I should define escalations. I mean, like a bug so critical that we down tools and work only on that until it's fixed, or mitigated in a way that's not so urgent. And so what I thought I first saw when I built this first metric, which is percentage of changes made for customers, so a combination of feature requests and customer bugs, is that team that was working on them would be kind of happier or more engaged with the product. They would have a better sense of what was going on. But when I combined that with the amount of work they were doing on escalations, which Team B is doing 31% of their work on just purely on escalation fixes, and Team A is doing 7%. That actually, it wasn't just that they were working on customer changes, it was that they were mainly working on escalations. So they were getting distracted, as in they had to keep dropping their work to work on a bug, then come back, a lot of context switching. And obviously there's that underlying pressure, even if no one tells you to fix it today, you're working on something that is, a negative for the product or giving a customer a negative feeling. So all of that said, this is just an example of how you can pull that data up to start having those sort of conversations and improving your sort of engineering department.
Nice. So yeah, keep everyone happy is I think a sentiment most people will share. Being able to do it in a sort of data driven way is certainly an interesting concept. What's this is because you're tracking sort of the source of work. Is this is Jira? This is other tools like that?
Yeah, this is Jira and Zendesk because we use Zendesk for our support ticketing.
Nice. Okay. And so what's the sort of action you can take from this? Is it to make sure that you're better sort of distributing the popular and unpopular work around the place?
Yeah, I'm just going to stop sharing, but like I did warn you, I don't have a good answer, right? But
sure.
These are just like a data-driven way of having the conversations with your team lead. So for me, that's really important, that I am never going to be close enough to see exactly what people are doing day to day, right? You've got to rely. I mean, and if I did do that, I'd probably really annoy all the other team leads. So you've got to try and get that combined sense of what different teams are doing, what might be stressing them, what's affecting them, even things they might not know, so that you can then start those conversations and maybe things come out of that. That, like I said, there isn't an answer, but you can say, there's a lot of escalations going on. How can we maybe share that around, or do we need to work on something more defensive, some defensive coding to reduce the number of escalations, because it feels better to be heading off problems that are going to happen rather than reacting and just fixing them when they come through.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate the candid answer there. And I mean, I was expecting to see nothing but sort of technical dashboards in this. It is kind of cool to know that sort of engineering takes a more sort of holistic approach here at SquaredUp, and hopefully that's inspiring to some of your colleagues out in the world who haven't tried SquaredUp yet. But if you're already a SquaredUp user and you're watching this, and there's anything that you've seen in there from Tim, Community Answers is a great place to sort of start a conversation around what you do with SquaredUp, what you might like to achieve. There's a new gist section for sort of sharing snippets for like API config or SQL analytics for building those Dorom metrics. We can certainly sort of share some of our bits, I'd imagine. But yeah, it's always great to get people who are watching, listening to this to share their stuff as well. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up on the engineering dashboard subject, or I think we're pretty much there?
No, I think we've pretty much exhausted everything.
Okay.
Then you're going to say, like, perhaps I should be putting up some of those Dora examples on your new gist section.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean the SQL stuff it's still a beta feature, I believe. We've still got it labeled as beta in the product. It still has its quirks, and so I think it is one of those areas where even seasoned SQL authors sometimes hit something a bit unusual. I think the more people we can encourage to actually be sort of trying these features, sharing their experiences, sharing the way they've managed to achieve something is useful for everyone, and it helps guide us as well with things that we've missed, features that need to be added or that kind of stuff. So yeah, up on screen you can see community answers at community.squaredup.com. You can head over to feedback.squaredup.com, which is our change log for plugins. You can request plugin changes, new plugins, that kind of stuff on there. If you have any questions, if you have any topics you want to talk to us about, if you want to join an episode of SQUPCAST at some point, just drop us an email, SQUPCAST@squaredup.com. But yeah, I think that's about it for today's episode. Next episode, we're going to be covering a big end-to-end product demo, deep dive into pretty much everything. The episode title is Sales Made Me Do It. It's one of those things the sales team always want an up-to-date demo recording for a product, and it's just something that's so hard to keep up to date with the vast velocity at which engineering are churning out changes these days. So yeah, tune in for the next one if you want to see just a really good sort of whistle-stop end-to-end tour of the product. But yeah, I'm sure we'll see you again at some point, Tim, in a future episode. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.